Hello, folks. Welcome back to World War II TV. And we all love some myths being debunked, don't we? Anyway, Niall Cherry has written extensively about British Special Forces and the 1st Airborne Division at Arnhem. And he's also led numerous tours of the battlefields with Ledger and Paul Reed. Mr. Ledger is in the sidebar today. Today, he's going to look at some of the classic myths and misconceptions about Market Garden and the battle. And I, frankly, can't wait to get going. So I'll bring him in now. Good evening, Neil. This is going to be a doozy, isn't it? This is going to be a good one. So
no, it's not. No, I have low standards.
The thing is that before we get started, we're at the era now where actually some of the younger people are less burdened by the myths of A Bridge Too Far and The Longest Day, because some people under their 30 and haven't seen those films. But for the great majority of people, that's the frame of reference. It's the movies, it's the memes, it's just the kind of the word of mouth story. So it can be challenging as a Normandy guide, and you're a Normandy guide as well as a Market Garden. You must, if you don't do it openly, you must kind of subliminally roll your eyes sometimes when one of the old classics comes up.
I'm going to say yes. In a nutshell, absolutely first class, spot on comment. And realistically, when we obviously agreed to do this I suggested it to you, and you very kindly said yes. I sat there and I wrote down. I had a piece of paper, and I just decided to throw some of the things that I've got thrown over the years.
Yeah.
Like I won't mention too much, but if I was thinking about this today, and the basis for this talk, and I know this is going to sound horrendous. I worked out that I've done about 45 man-years work as secretaries and representatives and helping with august bodies around the airborne forces, such as the Arnhem Fellowship, 15 years behind the scenes and as secretary with the Arnhem Veterans Club. So obviously I got to know a lot of the veterans and a lot of the families, and 20 years as the UK rep for the Society of Friends of the Airborne Museum, the Hartenstein. So that's 45 years in total. Yeah. And, and I think this, if you like, is the people who know me and come regularly on like fellowship tours, for example, we will have a laugh, and I hopefully will bring some of these, these myths and misconceptions and wonderful stories that I've heard from relatives and other interested people over the years. And if those people have heard of it, I'm sure other people have.
I mean, and that's the thing. The positive is a myth is a starting point for a conversation, isn't it? So if someone thinks they know something, and provided you don't patronize them, you can say, well, that's a very good question. And you can say, well, why do we think that? Here's why we think that. It's based on this. But now let's examine what really happened, and we can have a good conversation. It's a starting point. So there we are. Some Arnhem myths and a dose of reality with Mr. Niall Cherry. So I'm going to hand it over to you. So I love this first slide. So here we go.
So this is the classic one. Don't get this so much on tours, but we certainly have done over the years in correspondence. And as it says, exactly as it says on the tin, my dad, granddad, uncle, next door neighbour, and I was tempted to put my dog, but I didn't, did both D-Day and Arnhem. And so my usual comment to these wonderful people, to them is, so he was a glider pilot, was he?
Yeah.
And they look at me and they say, no, he was in the parachute regiment. And then we go into the fact is that, well, basically there were two, I'm sure we all know, 1st and 6th Airborne Divisions. Very, 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 very few men went from the 6th to the 1st, but a lot of men went from the 1st to the 6th, but all in 1943.
Yeah.
When we can do, my dad, as I said, did both D-Day and Arnhem, 80 years of research, 80 years plus of research, and with the help of Airborne Assault Duxford, other good friends such as mine, such as John Howes and Bob Hilton, Graham Francis, just to name drop 3 people, we have found one man with a very, very, very good cast iron case to have done both D-Day and Arnhem, who wasn't a glider pilot. And that is a war correspondent. He parachuted in on D-Day, 6th of June, and then went to glide up to LZZ on the 18th of September, and that was Guy Byam. I think he worked for the Daily Express from the top of my head, and sadly killed in October in a B-17 over Berlin because he went on there. And so that's glider pilots, we're not really sure of the number. I'm going to name drop another good friend of mine, Luke Bouse. I was talking to him the other night because I realized that I don't know how many glider pilots did both D-Day and Arnhem, and we don't think it's that many, certainly less than 100.
Yeah.
Is the number that gets touted around. So that's our next task for me and Luke. Next time we have a beer together, we'll get his list out and we'll try and work out. So Guy Byam definitely did both, apart from the aircrew and glider pilots. And then we have a man with a very, very tenuous link to this, doing both D-Day, two men actually. Guy Stevens, you may know, those of you that are in the Arnhem, definitely into the Arnhem Anoraks, will know the picture of General Gene Hackman, General Sosabowski, with holding the apple after the conference with Browning. The liaison officer in the middle is Lieutenant Colonel Stevens. He was the commanding officer of the 12th Devons in the 6th Airborne Division, 6th Air Landing Brigade, and he obviously went to sea by Normandy. He spoke fluent Polish. I don't know how he managed to do it, but whatever, he was a fluent feeler. So they pulled him out of the 12 Devons and sent him to Arnhem. Drill. He make it to Arnhem. And I suppose in theory, this one is customer driven. There we are. There's some good words for tonight.
Yep.
Normally speaking, at least once a year. Yes, thank you, Paul, but we did say glider pilots, so we think about 100. This is a classic one. Normally happens 2 or 3 times a year on tour, either in Normandy and Arnhem. I get somebody come up to me, and several times they come up with the Stephen Ambrose book on Pegasus Bridge, because he wrote in there that Wagger Thornton or Sergeant M. Thornton, Michael Thornton, I think it was, said that he was called Three Bridges Thornton because he was on both Euston 1, Euston 2 and Arnhem Bridge. A dose of reality. He may well have been at Arnhem Bridge, but, and it's a very, very big but in capital letters, underlined 16 times, there is no trace of him in the transfer and enlistment book of transferring from the Oxon Bucks Light Infantry to the Parachute Regiment in 1944. There is no trace of a man with his name or number doing a parachute course at RAF Wingway in the Second World War. And if he was at the Arnhem Road Bridge, and we'll come on to the Arnhem Road Bridge a little bit later on, there is no trace of him being taken prisoner at Arnhem Road Bridge, reported missing from the Parachute Regiment, and appearing in any of the POW records. Not saying I'm right, but if somebody can come up with some documentary evidence that Mr. Thornton and Mr. Ambrose can come up with that fact, I will be highly delighted to see it, shall we say, and I will tell you what I'll do. I'll run naked round my house.
Oh, blimey, good grief.
Good grief, yes, good grief. Yeah. And it won't be on air either.
No, let's not make that a public stream, although you never know, the viewers might go through the roof, but yes. Let's keep on moving.
Here's another one. Sorry, I was going to say, Paul, if obviously, like my good friend Paul, thanks to obviously, no, back one, please. Oh, no, I was just going to say, if anybody does want any questions in the sidebar, if we can scribble them down or whatever, perhaps we can do them at the end, because obviously I want to
I'm saving any ones that are pertinent. Don't worry. We'll do it.
Fantastic. So obviously our classic case of Market Barden betrayed, the King Kong story, several books soon after the war, it was betrayed. What was the other rise? What was I going to say is, did the Germans have dozens of tanks in Arnhem? Well, question mark. So the betrayal the first time it raised its ugly head was obviously soon after the war. Christian Lindemans, this man here, otherwise known as King Kong. Interesting character, a Dutchman. His brother was in German custody. He was working for the British. I was going to say working for the Dutch resistance, and consequently had contacts with SOE, worked in an escape pipeline for drowned RAF aircrew, was sent back in September, was turned by this Herman Giskins, who was the main player in the England spill, and I'm sure you listeners will know about that. Pressurised Lindemans to work for them. Lindemans agreed, obviously, that his brother, pregnant wife, would be released. Sent over from Belgium into Holland in early September, or around about the 10th of September, gave the Germans information that, in his words, 300 British tanks would attack Eindhoven. That is what he basically said. Arnhem was never mentioned, it is said by Lindemans, and the information that obviously passed on to the Germans, I say in no way, no value to influence the course of the battle. But obviously it's made its way into several books, and I think we might as well go to the next one about Lindemann. And obviously the plans were found in a glider. Yes, nice little, obviously you've seen the slides, but obviously couple of stills from not Theirs Is the Glory, A Bridge Too Far. As we know, the German sentry or the German soldier goes into the crashed glider. An American officer, it is said, did take the plans with him in his not to be taken into the air, all that usual sort of good stuff. 101st Airborne Division. They ended up coming to Model and Beatrix in the morning, it is said, of the 18th, 19th. But by then, as I often say on the ground when we're talking about the plan being betrayed, if you have airborne troops, the start line is on the Dutch-Belgian border at Joe's Bridge near Pelt. You have airborne troops landing at Eindhoven, airborne troops landing at Nijmegen, airborne troops landing at Arnhem, and an attack has started from down there in the Belgian border. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to join the dots up.
Yeah,
where the overall objective is. The other thing I was going to say is the Germans certainly admitted to using these plans, but basically to say that they got the ground recognition signals for these supply drops, because that was what the main use of those plans were. And as we classically know, no military plan survives first contact with the enemy. The Germans were going to move anti-aircraft guns into the area anyway, because they knew that the 1st Airborne Division was obviously left out on a limb. And I always jokingly say to passengers who ask me about Arnhem being betrayed, if the operation had been betrayed 2 to 3 days beforehand, why was Model still there and left in a hurry? And secondly, probably more importantly, why was there not a German round every single yard of the drop and landing zones firing at all the guys coming down and landing, and they wouldn't have needed to fight for 9 days? The operation would have been over on the first afternoon.
Yeah. There's a fundamental difference, Neil, between a vague sense of something brewing and knowing exactly what's going to happen, which is the same as the ridiculous FDR knew about Pearl Harbor in advance bullshit, isn't it? Of course, there's an state of alert and there's a possibility the Japanese are going to be doing something somewhere, blah, blah. But the idea that there's complete prior knowledge of an operation is ridiculous. So yeah, that I mean, a build-up of troops opposite you does not the plan give as such, you know.
No, and the other thing I always say is the Germans for D-Day. One thing I nearly always say several times each day, the Germans knew we were coming, but they didn't know when and they didn't know where. And you could almost say that about Arnhem or Market Garden. They knew we had an airborne army in England. Yep. They knew it was going to be used, but they didn't know when and they didn't know where.
Yeah, fair enough.
On that unhappy note, we might as well move on.
German armour.
Was it a surprise the 9th and 10th SS, the film would have you think so? So the evidence, shall we say, if you can call it evidence. Might as well go to the next one. So an Enigma Decrypt, 5th of September. 9th and 10th SS divisions not operating to be transferred for rest and refit in the Venlo, Arnhem, Den Bosch areas. 6th of September, located 2nd S Panzer Corps and 9 SS Panzer Division, or normally part of this area, Arnhem area. And between the 11th and 13th September, Dutch reports received noting the arrival of 9th SS Panzer Division in the Arnhem area. What more can I say? Except let's go to the next one, unless you wish to chip in.
Yeah, no, I'm fine.
Browning informed senior officers. Ultra wasn't mentioned, but I suspect he was. I suspect a man of his rank at Lieutenant General would have been privy to limited edited highlights, shall we say, from the Ultra intelligence reports. And so he was certainly aware, and he reported to his senior officers German armour in the area. Repeated in the 1st Airborne Division intelligence summary for the same day. Then if we go on again, we have Brigadier Lafbury. So AH is obviously official history. When and where he first learned that they would comment, and during the initial briefing by the Corps Commander Browning, the suspected presence of the 2nd SS Panzer Corps in the area was mentioned. Post-war, I certainly never considered it in my plan.
Mhm.
Then first intelligence parachute, first parachute brigade intelligence summary, 13th of September, 3-4 days before the operation. If you go on, got the original there. Cracking on with some of these slides. I know that I appreciate that's not great, but if you go to the next one, because people perhaps can come back at this on YouTube if they want to have a look. If you go to the next one, I think the key point, there is little information, blah, 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 except the HQ for Panzer training was Swallow, which is also the location of 20 mobile brigades, perhaps in the whole area contains 15,000, blah, 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 blah. And that's what we thought were there. Key point 1. And then I know this one is a shit, sorry, not a particularly good slide, but as you can see, WW2TV, he was Willie Taylor, and he was in the, this is another little myth, I suppose. He was obviously in the attic with Lathbury, sorry, not Lathbury, Roy Urquhart and Jimmy Clementson, but of course he gets airbrushed out of the film. It's just the two of them. And incidentally, he was killed in 1955. And this is another one of those hairs on the back of the neck moments on the coach. I go down the coach. So those long-suffering passengers who've been with me first day, I go down the coach, say, why have you come? Not a rude question, you know, have you got an interest? And this bloke stops and he said, oh, well, my dad was Willie Taylor. And I just looked at him and I said, you mean the intelligence officer of the 1st Parachute Brigade? And he looked at me and he said, how do you know that? And I said, I just do. And it was the first time he'd ever been back to Arnhem. So obviously we took him, I didn't get him into the house, but we certainly took him in his father's footsteps, shall we say. Wow. So let's quickly crack on. And then the key point again, 10,000 troops southwest of Wohlen may represent a battle-scarred panzer division or 2 reforming. So they knew, therefore, that there were definitely SS troops in the area. So you get the scene in the film, don't you, where I was a bit surprised to find Beatrix Panzer Troop. Wasn't expecting, you know, we didn't expect that story about 2 men and a dog, shall we say. And just David O'Keefe is saying that Browning absolutely was ultra cleared, so he absolutely would have known about the ultra. And David makes a very pertinent point, which I'm sure you'll react to, of the fact they must have known because they started beefing up the anti-tank elements in the 1st Airborne. So why would you do that if you weren't expecting a little bit more armor than you'd previously thought? Yep. Good point. I think Frost made a good point as well that, well, David, I'm going to say, hold that thought for till slide number whatever, about 29 or 30, somewhere about there. Right. And you will see something I hope will be of interest to you. So let's move swiftly on.
And just before we do, Stuart Burbidge just say it's all about numbers, isn't it? The 2nd SS Panzer Corps was hardly a corps at this stage, isn't it? This is the era when information about a German unit, is it full strength? Is it half strength? Are the tanks broken down? Are they got the crews? It's very hit and miss about knowing that there is a German division. Well, it's only part of the story, isn't it? You know.
Yes. I suppose in theory, and I always jokingly say this usually on the ground, there's only one thing more than paratroopers and airborne forces hate more than Royal Marines, and that's armor. Yeah. You know, because you know, even if you've only got a few tanks, it's enough. And I suppose, can I just take a step back? And this thought has just come into my head based on what Stuart has said. The Falaise pocket finished on about what, the 25th, 26th of August. Yeah. By the 3rd of September, the Germans had made it to the Dutch-Belgian border. Yeah. 9th and 10th have been sent up to the Zwolle area, Apeldoorn, blah, blah, blah. So they had the best part of a week. Now, I know a week doesn't sound a long time, but when you consider that I suspect when they were looking for reinforcements, replacements, that the SS, because also Model said, didn't he, Beatrix Panzer troops need a rest before they're going to start patterns advance. Send them to Arnhem, in inverted commas. And also, I suspect they would have got a few replacements in at that time and also some equipment.
Sergeant Swiper is making the very pertinent comment, continuing your Falaise point there about Normandy intelligence reports on German forces and 9th, 10th SS Panzer strength, etc., are very self-congratulatory. And there'd been a long wait for a fundamental victory, you know, a game-changing victory in Normandy. And we now know there was some overcounting and there was So I think, he's very correct. Then he goes on to say these intelligence failings underpin errors in Market Garden. There is a little bit of over counting in terms of Normandy, which directly feeds into the bit of overconfidence, perhaps, when you're moving into Market Garden.
I've said this before on the ground, and we're going very much into Normandy. This is almost a Normandy talk as well.
Well, you can't separate.
You can't get away from it. No, you cannot get away from it. When you talk about RAF Typhoon pilots and Mustang pilots shooting up a column, 4 of them do it. They all say they destroyed 20. That's 4 times 20 is 80 from different squadrons potentially. And it's a bit like I hate to decry the 8th Air Force, but it's the same thing in my head with B-17s over Germany flying on a mission. They shoot down 1 aircraft, but it's shot down by 30 gunners in their box, and they put in 30 claims. Another good point. I mean, Browning, this is almost another, I mean, I hate to say this, Paul, but as you might imagine, I wax lyrically on the ground for 10 minutes about, I'm not a fan of Browning. Usually, as I jokingly say, I character assassinate him at Grosbeak Cemetery, but then that's probably another one of my talks. It's a mini pop-up talk for another day, perhaps. What Browning wanted to do.
I'd love to do a general Browning show with you. I'm doing a general series in September. We're reevaluating James Gavin. There's been 1 or 2 about MacArthur. So if you want to do a general Browning one and let rip, I'm happy to do that. Think about it.
Well, it depends what Mr. Reed's got me doing in September.
Or we can do it. We can do it later. Anyway, let's move on. A subject very close to my heart: the good old Recce Squadron.
Yes. Well, brought to public attention in Roy Urquhart's book in 1958. Among the gliders as well, those containing most of the squadron vehicles. That was picked up by Ryan, obviously, in A Bridge Too Far, and his comments sort of made it into the film. 1976, there was a pretty good book by John Fairley called Remember Arnhem, and also another one by my very good friend Bob Hilton, 2015, Freddie Goff Specials. Bob went into great detail, revealing, as we said, that 25 out of the 28 planned to carry out the coup de main actually made it. The total number of jeeps allocated to the Recce Squadron was 36. So the Recce Squadron never arrived. Bit of a myth.
I mean, they got shot up pretty quickly at Wolf Hazer and up on the by the restaurant there on the northern approach. But the idea they didn't get there is clearly immediately debunked there by hard data. So
there's another little one for you, because obviously one of the books that I was kind enough to co-author with another good friend of mine called Scott Revell from Australia and Bob Gerritsen, a Dutchman. There was only 9 men from Kraft's unit up on that knoll shooting at the Recce Squadron jeeps, and if they'd literally, I reckon, been there about 5 minutes, if that. So
timing was just
well, hence the book is called A Few Vital Hours, because it's all about Kraft's unit, and they were 16 and 17 and 18 year olds. So here we are scraping the back. Anyway, those are 2 books if you want to look about that. The one on the right will probably quite relatively easy to find, Remember Arnhem by John Fairley, and coincidentally that is the first Arnhem book I ever bought that I didn't shoplift, Paul.
It might well be the first book I bought as well on Arnhem, although maybe I had A Bridge Too Far first.
And unfortunately, the other one, Scott Revell's just popped in.
Yeah, he's watching. Yeah.
Obviously, Freddie Goff Specials, if you can find a copy of that, it's usually about £200 to £300. Anyway, let's move on. I'm not here to sell books, and I haven't got any to sell anyway. Now, here we go. Yes. I don't mind this. This is an easy one. This is a relatively easy one, because everyone can agree the drop and landing zones were too far away from the objectives. But. It's almost like Sean Connery says in the film, isn't it? You are intending us to drop us somewhere, I suppose, or land us because my blokes can't land on chimneys. Problem 1, 3 objectives, basically in built-up areas, locked perceived flak around the built-up areas. Because I know it's not a great map, but you can see Arnhem over on the right-hand side of the map, nice bits of green left and right. Sorry, on the left and to the above Arnhem. There are, let's go to the next one, because I think I'll make this point. Other open areas to the east were even further away from the objectives than the ones that were chosen on the left-hand side of Arnhem as opposed to the right side. This is another one that I think a lot of the professional historians seem to gloss over. 1941 late 41, early 42. Churchill had obviously wanted 5,000 airborne troops, blah, 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 1940. In his mind, it wasn't proceeding fast enough. He said there needs to be a meeting. And basically, this is one of those classic occasions where the RAF basically said, we're not really interested in this dropping of airborne forces. We want to go and bomb Germany. Mindset at the time. Approval for the landing zones to be selected by them, but the RAF always had the final say on locations. The only time they were overruled on that was Varsity. So the lessons learned, there's another jumping forward. When you look at Varsity, some of the cock-ups at Arnhem were not repeated at Varsity. Like, don't like drop on top of the objective. The gliders with the equipment landing on the same landing zone, drop zone as the paratroopers. So tough luck, old boy. You'll just have to get on with those selected. So number 3, I think there's a number 3 on this one.
No, next one is Baskerville.
Okay, sorry. Okay, do apologise. Let's go to the next one. Oh, yes. Good old Lance Sergeant Baskerville and his Tiger tanks, shall we say. This wonderful, who is it, Terence Cuneo painting, magnificent one. Quite a nice, stood on that corner many times. Obviously, it's changed a little bit. More houses have been built. The tree's still in the, there's a tree in the garden with a little plaque to Jack. Baskerville, but that's just gives you a little bit of a heads up on what happened there. If we go to his citation, which I think is there, this again, this is another interesting one, because obviously we've done, and I'm going to give credit to John Howes again for this. He's my go-to man for the National Archives in London. He spent a few hours actually looking at the Victoria Cross actions for Arnhem. There is no original citation. We can't find out who wrote it. We can't find out who signed it. The only thing you've got, and it's the same for Quirperil, it's exactly, it's as written. So there's no way of knowing who wrote it, etc., who signed it off, etc., etc. But obviously it went through the system. But anyway, I think when I read his citation on the ground, you do get a bit of classic stiff upper lip, propaganda value. And I think when you look at the VCs, we can easily say 5 VCs for Arnhem, 1 to each brigade, 1 to the RAF, and a living one for propaganda purposes back in England, which is obviously was Robert Kane, Terry Clarkson's father-in-law. So anyway, as you can see, the crew commanded by the NCO responsible for the detection of 2 Tiger tanks and at least 1 self-propelled gun, each tank to come within 100 yards. Badly wounded, gun gets knocked out, other people get killed and wounded. I've actually done, I think, a little article on this. Not many South staffs were killed that day, so I think most of the gun crews were wounded, shall we say. But obviously, his Baskerville supreme gallantry is beyond praise. During many days on, stories of his valor are constantly displayed in all ranks, whether they were or not, I don't know. So to sum up, in my head, 2 Tigers and 2 self-propelled guns. So a Stug in situ, 100 yards away from where his guns were positioned. So there's Tiger tank number 1, which, as you can see, is a Stug. Number 2 is again, next one, I think. That's another picture of the Stug, and it's interesting. You can just see some, looks like it's had 5 goes at it before it knocked it out on the glassy plate there. So there's a better view of the Stug, and that was advancing towards Arnhem, towards Baskerville's position. So that was still there in 1945. So again, not a Stug. Sorry, not a Tiger, shall we say. But of course, and this is probably the Tiger number 2. This is his self-propelled gun. This is one of those 20mm flat guns, half tracks, fully tracked, half track. Not more to say, really, just by the railway bridge.
Yeah, and I would draw a viewer's attention to the fantastic show we did with Marcel back in early in the year about armour in Arnhem. And it's that classic example of a VC like Medal of Honor citations often being dabbled at by PR people and people for the press, and some obvious liberties taken to make them sound basically sexier for the press. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that, and we're not questioning Baskerville's balls to stand up there and fire at any approaching armored vehicle. It's just getting the facts right, isn't it?
Yes, and classically, you no doubt have heard it. You've said it. You've heard it. Even British soldiers do it. Every tank they saw in the Second World War after 1940 or after D-Day was a Tiger.
Tigers, 88s, Spandaus. It's the language and lexicon of the day, isn't it? That's just, yes. We just accept that that's what the language these guys used. And yeah, fair enough. It's deciphering it and making sense of it. So here we go. Yeah.
And I think the next one, oh yes.
As if by magic, there we are, the Piat.
Bring up the Piat, yes. Bit of poetic license in the film. Obviously, just to bore you briefly, a friend of mine called Steve Elsey used to be in the household. What was he in? The Household Cavalry, Blues and Royals. They were in Germany in 1977 when they were making this film, and he is driving one of these tanks. But it's a Land Rover with fiberglass on it to make knocked up to look like a tank. No tanks after Grabner's column, and we'll come on to the Grabner column. No tanks like that in the film crossed from south to north. The two or three Tigers that did turn up all came from the east, brought over from Germany. Never. And then went down south. They did cross the river a little bit further on. But I have no doubt, of course, we can classically say every commander at some point at the Battle of Arnhem shouted, "Bring up the Piat." A nice line. And the one above it is obviously, the one in the top left-hand corner. I'm sure the more knowledgeable viewers or most people will recognise that as a shot from Theirs Is the Glory for the Panther that have been knocked out in Oosterbeek. And good old Frank Dixon from the Army Catering Corps gets sent out by Boy Wilson from the 21st IPC to go and knock out his Tiger, and it wasn't moving and it wasn't firing at him. So anyway, enough said. Bring up the Piat.
I want to add the comment. I think I mean, Piats were obviously used in the Battle of Market Garden. They were extensively used by the British Army, blah, blah, blah. But I think it's perpetuating this idea of the 1st Airborne Division being these kind of plucky but underarmed people against the odds, when in fact, as we've talked about it before, they do have proper anti-tank guns. They do have a decent capability with them, but that's not shown. It's not as that story of wheeling actual anti-tank guns into position is not as sexy as some, poor guy running out into the street with a Piat or lobbing a grenade over a wall. So I think it's as exciting as these stories are. It's giving a false impression of the strength of the 1st Airborne Division in Arnhem.
Can we say hold that thought till slides 28 and 29? I'm going to say, because I'm not. I don't want to say. And the other thing, of course, I was going to say is, and this is an interesting one, is when we stand on the bridge, and people think, well, thank you, Paul. Thank you, Mr. Reed. Yes, we're coming on to the other bits and pieces. The distance of that effective range was about 25, 30 yards. So when people say, I've seen the film that John Frost calls for the Piat to come forward and they fire at the tank. And I said, his building was over there, 50 yards away. The Tiger, in theory, in the film, or the Panther in the film, was there 50 yards away. The effective range was about not going to happen. But it's a film. And I wonder if I should get this one in now. I think I'll do it now. I was going to say it a little bit later, but obviously I do. Some of the senior commanders at Arnhem, and certainly John Waddy, Major B Company Commander in the 156, became a very good friend of mine. I met him very, very many long conversations with him. And one day we got talking about the film, A Bridge Too Far, because he had left the army by then, was working for Westlands as their military helicopter advisor, was given leave of absence for a year to do the film. As their senior military technical advisor. And obviously when John Frost turned up, he complained to Dickie Attenborough about some of the scenes that went on, blah, 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 and how the officers were portrayed and other bits and pieces. So John complained to Dickie, didn't get anywhere. So he thought, I'm going to take this. He managed to get a meeting with Joseph Levine, who was the American producer of the film. And as John said to me, there we were having this meeting. He was smoking this foot-long cigar that was about, a a foot round as well. I outlined my comments, concerns and observations and complaints. He took a big draw on his cigar, blew the smoke in my direction, looked at me and said, and excuse to any American friends, excuse my American accent, Colonel Wadi, I make films for money and not for accuracy. And that comment, I usually use it on every single battlefield tour I go on, regardless of whether it's at Arnhem or not. And I think it just sums up military World War II films in a nutshell. I make films.
They're not made for us. Yeah, they have never been made for us. They're not made for us. If we think the makers of SAS Rogue Heroes or Masters of the Air sit around going, well, what will the geeks think? They are not having those conversations. Yeah.
No, definitely not. No, the good line for the film. Right. Tigers and King Tigers, certainly in the area. First Tiger tanks didn't arrive till the 19th. They come from Paderborn in Germany, that good old British Army armament base. First deployed against the 1st Airborne at the road bridge, and they came along the road which runs along the north, or the Rhine embankment on the north side. Then they were allocated to the Kampfgruppe Naust, reigned here for many hours, and then went to, after clearance of the road bridge, we got a picture of the road bridge being cleared, they moved south towards Elst. Yeah. But one King Tiger, certainly. So this is a picture taken from one of Marcel's. Hopefully Marcel won't kill me. He is a friend of mine. This is taken from his first book, German Armoured Units. 2 pictures, I've got a feeling, of Tigers in Arnhem on the north side. There we are. And you can see the Arnhem Road Bridge in the background there. So that is on the 19th or the 20th. They arrived there, he says, on 0030 on the 18th. I think he probably means the 19th. Alarm was raised at 0300. They had to drive some of the way. Some of the Tigers broke down on the way. They couldn't get them there on the flatback lorries, the flatback railway cars, which is where most of the King Tigers and the Tigers did turn up in Oosterbeek. They drove down from Arnhem Railway Station as they were Stuck Mark IIIs.
And this is a good reminder, and Marcel's book is a cracker, and other people like yourself and the other Bob Hilton, as you mentioned, have done some incredible work resetting the balance and not specifically trying to attack the myths, but just telling the stories. But the thing is, in some ways, we're pissing in the wind. How many billion people worldwide have seen A Bridge Too Far compared to how many tens of thousands have read the book? So it's always good to correct these things. But, you know, you're up against the lions led by donkeys kind of
Absolutely
thing, aren't you? That these things are just ingrained and we have to accept it. And it provides a conversation points. But yeah, I like to think there are more people correcting these wrongs and getting information out there. But part of me, the pragmatist in me says, yeah, but these myths will just keep on enduring because they will.
I'm entirely happy. You know, we've got our three viewers, and if they all learn just one little fact that they didn't know before,
222 right now. It's the best show for a couple of weeks. So yeah. So let's go back to the bridge then. Back to you.
Now this is a classic one, isn't it? So John Frost wrote to the editor of Pegasus. Let's just say. It is sad that Major Toller should have to draw to the attention to the fact there were no depictions of the actions fought by the 1st Air Landing Anti-Tank Brigade at Arnhem Bridge in the film A Bridge Too Far. As one of the consultants, I realised there was going to be serious admissions, blah, 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 blah. I asked that a statement regarding this should be made at some stage, even before the performance, blah, 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 blah. The battle at the bridge ended to ask who all members of the division who were there. Survivors scattered and wide, never to forgather again, blah, blah. Major Bill Arnold, and many had little chance of paying tribute to Major Bill Arnold, who was the OC, and his splendid men who manned the 6-pounder guns. And there were 5 of them there. It was also impossible to sight them with cover, blah, blah, blah. No soldiers had quite such a daunting role, and no others showed greater gallantry, devotion and skill. And that is from John Frost to a bunch of crap hats, probably in his eyes, because they were air landing troops, came by glider. But that's an interesting little letter, as you can see. And he said that none. Sorry, if you just go back one, if you don't mind, please. None who saw them in action will forget the gunners at the bridge. You know, and he also made a comment about the parachute sappers as well, that they were some of the best infantry that he had under his command. But we're going to come on to that a little bit later on again. Numbers at the bridge. blah blah blah. So just a little letter there that hopefully that helps. Was it David O'Keefe? It's probably may not have seen that letter before. I don't know. It was in 1970.
We'll find out. He'll answer. Yeah, he'll
I'm
answer.
sure he'll put, of course, obviously. That's that classic slide, the Grosvenor column. They cut a gap in the bridge parapet with solid shot. The guns were down here in in some of the builder's yard, jacked up on bricks. And I think John Frost himself made the comment, not necessarily in the letter, without the anti-tank gunners, they wouldn't have been able to hold on for so long. Eventually, the 5 guns were put out of action, but that's a story for another day, isn't it, realistically? Yep. So that another little myth there. Most people think all the vehicles were destroyed by Piats and the 6-pounder anti-tanks get glossed over. Yeah.
No, good point. Well made.
And then we have the final. There was a King Tiger in Weverstraat. Those of you that have actually seen a King Tiger in the flesh will think to themselves, what the bloody hell were they thinking of doing, sending that down to Oosterbeek? Knocked Out was there for several months afterwards. Had about 3 or 4 goes at it before they got it with a 6-pounder. That 6-pounder, 75 and Piats. So a combination of all 3 knocked that out. And just to name drop again, my good friend Robert Voskill, whose father again was a technical advisor to the film, he lives in the Weverstraat still. And that was taken about, that Tiger was parked about 30 yards from his house. And we often, if we're doing a little bit of a walking tour around Arnhem, we'll often go there and show you where that King Tiger knocked out. But totally impractical, 70 tons going down some of those streets. I don't know what they thought they were doing.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the classic conversation. There's a sidebar conversation about moving armor about and bridge weight and all those kind of things. You know, as Oddball tells us in Kelly's Heroes, although he's talking about the Panther, the King Tiger is not an urban warfare tank. It's the last thing I'd want to take down streets and fight against an enemy with gammon bombs and Hawkins mines and it's whatever.
They were in charge.
Whoops. Yeah.
So I think we go on. And this is, I don't know whether, I know Scott, yes, if Scott's listening, you might want to contact Scott because he's done quite a lot of research into the Sturmgeschütz Brigade 280. He'll probably shoot me for saying that, but obviously this is one of the many Tigers in Oosterbeek. As you can see, it's a Stug. Captain Robson of the Glider Pilot Regiment, who had a broken foot, which is why he's not got one sock there being taken. And obviously loads and loads of German photos, 19th, 20th of September in Oosterbeek. And that's probably, there's another talk there. German photographs in Oosterbeek. If Marcel didn't do, I'm sure Marcel used several in his, and we are very lucky. And for the armour fans, you've obviously got the side shields, Zimmerit, if I've got that right, and in the full-size one, I don't know, just in the top right-hand corner of the photograph, you can just about see, I'm going to say about 8 to 10 Germans, and they're all having a fag in the background there. This was obviously a haven of tranquility, literally 300 yards from Divisional HQ.
David O'Keefe makes the point about the King Tigers. They were using whatever they could that was at hand. And as you said earlier about the ambush in Wolfhazer, probably having only been there 5 minutes, those guys, this is undermining this myth that the Germans know everything, that they're completely prepared, and they're just kind of rolling up a badly planned, badly unfolding British or Allied plan. The Germans are just doing what they can. I mean, they did it effectively, as we're not going to try and turn the Battle of Arnhem into a British victory. But the idea that the Germans are doing everything, in a slick, professional, they're just reacting with whatever they've got. That's a very good point by David.
Yeah, I mean, you look at and Scott's a really, really good guy, and I think you should get him on if he's agreeable. He does live in Australia, so I don't know whether it's probably early
morning. A morning show for me, evening for him if he wants to. Scott,
yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, they threw together all these camp groups. You've got Spindler, the artillery. Was he the artillery commander, or his men had no tanks, but they all were Waffen SS, just fought as infantry. Engineer, Muller's engineering, everybody threw together. They were throwing, an interesting one here, and we can go on, we could talk for hours. You've got all the troops that were von Tetau, the General von Tetau, and they had loads and loads of naval guys there, Luftwaffe. It was almost like all three services were there, and including the famous woman as well. They had the woman. She wasn't fighting, but we certainly took a Luftwaffe woman prisoner, and I haven't really covered that in there because that's not. That is actually an interesting one. I'll just digress. You might be aware there was a Luftwaffe female auxiliary helper, Irene Reichmann, something like that. She was taken prisoner on the afternoon of the 17th. She was camped near Renken with her boyfriend or boyfriends in the hayloft, apparently. And I watched a very, very poor documentary some years ago, and they showed glider pilot Joe Price lighting a cigarette for her when she was behind the Hartenstein in the tennis courts, and the voiceover was, and the locals were highly delighted to be liberated. So again, you get it in TV programs, no thought of what the film is. But anyway, let's move on, because I'm sure we'll both be boiling. Now this is one that I don't get so much on the ground, because I warn my lovely passengers not to use that 4-letter word in my presence, because if they do, I won't answer their question. Obviously, many TV documentaries, it's always John Frost and his 2 4-letter word men at the bridge. So we have the exact number, as we said, who form the fighting strength of the bridge will never be known. So if you look at it, you've got the 2nd Parachute Battalion, about 340, 1st Parachute Brigade HQ 110, 1st Parachute Squadron Royal Engineers 75, 3rd Parachute Battalion 45, 1st Air Landing Anti-Tank Battery 40, 250 Light Composite Company Royal Army Service Corps 40 men, 9th Field Company 30 men. Next one, please. Go on again.
Hang on.
Yep, no worries. 17 glider pilots with the 6-pounder anti-tank guns. Recce Squadron, Royal Artillery Forward Observations, Royal Army Ordnance Corps, REME, Intelligence Corps, Military Police, 1 officer from the Command of Royal Officer. All in all, a total of around 740 men. 1 Lieutenant Colonel present, John Frost, but no less than 12 majors and around 60 officers. Small number of REMC present. So as you can see there, we have around about 740 men, and less than half of them were from John Frost and his 2 4-letter word men, boys.
Yep.
Do we say?
Yep.
Just so
Tamsin is saying she thinks it was 11 officers and men from the Recce, but I mean, it's I think Bob Hilton named all 8 in his book. Let's go back to Tasmin. Does she have a copy of Freddie Goff's specials? She has. She mentioned she got hers for £45 earlier on. So yeah.
Oh, fantastic. So that 4-letter word. The blokes in the Second World War didn't use it. Neither do I. Should we go just back one there?
Yeah. Sorry.
Yes, a letter from an old and bold. And this guy, Alan Parry, I'm sure you will know his name.
Yeah.
So as he said, I referred to the 9th Parachute Battalion and not 9 4-letter word. Never in my life have I used to me this loathsome abbreviation, neither will I use it. So if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me. So I feel you get people who use it a lack of knowledge and research, because the guys.
It's one of those things that I think, speaking as a Normandy guy, I think some of the veterans I met, because by the time I met them, they may have been part of the Parachute Regiment Association for years. They've met guys from the Falklands. They've met other guys. I've definitely heard them use it in a more modern. I was part of 9 para, they would say, but I'm completely with you. Contemporary accounts going back, it was always battalion parachute. So I have definitely heard veterans use it, but I think that's the evolution of language.
Yes, because it wasn't really started using until the 1950s, and you will still have World War II veterans in the Parachute Regiment in the 1950s.
Yeah.
And I've got the rest of that letter if people want to catch it up later on. We go to the next one, Paul, please. Blah, 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 blah. Alan Parry, and in the editorial comment, what can I say except to offer my sincere apologies to all wartime and immediate post-war members of parachute battalions, etc., etc. And for those, I'm sure many of you viewers, Alan Parry, Merville Battery as a major. Yeah. Can't think what company off the top of my head. I'll bow to Mr. Normandy for that one.
Yeah, I can't remember what company. No, I can't remember.
Anyway, let's move on. Let's move on.
Right. Here we go. Yep.
Yeah. So this is I was actually in a bar in Oosterbeek with 3 members of the 10th Battalion, and this guy came up to me and said, "Oh, you were in 10 4-letter world in World War II." And the veteran said to him, he said, "Would you like to step outside for a discussion about that word you've just used?" So I'll leave it at that.
Paul Reed is adding, when he met Windy Gale, he most certainly did not use the 4-letter word. So there we are. Yeah. Well,
it's one for the purists, but then hopefully the majority of the people who are watching this are purists, and we want to get it right. As simple as that, isn't it? So
yeah.
Right then. So let's go on to, I think we've got another one of the classic little ones coming up now. The pillbox at the road bridge. We have the one. I apologise. It's not a great scene, is it, from A Bridge Too Far? But obviously it was dark when they were shooting it. And obviously on the right-hand side of this, you have the wonderful concrete pillbox. I don't even think that's even a German design, is it, to be honest with you? I've never seen a German pillbox like that anywhere. Anyway, so that's the scene from the film. And as I'm sure you know, you get the 2 guys with the flamethrower coming up. Blah, blah, blah. Next one, please. Ginger Wilkinson. So there's a nice picture of what the flamethrower looked like. I think the guys used to call it the donut. Not a particularly nice weapon. I can't imagine you'd want to jump with that in your kit bag, or never mind even carry it, because if a bit of shrapnel went through that, I think you'd be literally toast, as they say. Anyway, nice little picture there, and potentially up to 6 taken to Arnhem, used by the engineers. So the pillbox in reality. You may just note in the top left-hand corner, you can see the remains of a 20mm anti-aircraft gun. Yep. Just on top of that wooden structure. You can see the bridge railings just to the left of the 251, and that is the pillbox as it was in 1944, made out of wood. And the other thing I would say on this, you've got some knife rests, as I call them, barbed wire piled up on the road there. So that is taken, the guys, that's looking north. So these are members of the SS, probably the 9th, just about to head down towards Elst, and that to Blunt 30 Gores drive up towards the Arnhem area. So that's a little bit of the pillbox in reality. If we go to the next one, a close-up of it, there's the pillbox, nice little wooden structure. Doesn't show signs of being hit by a flamethrower to me. Because they missed that and took out the hut next door, which set some paint, explosives, whatever. So that's a little bit of a true story.
You can completely understand why they wanted to have that scene, because A, it's at night, because they would have less traffic on the bridge for filming. You get that great scene of the paintwork on the bridge catching alight, and I wouldn't want to not see that scene in the movie, even if I know it isn't true. I don't, again, I don't watch that movie with my historian hat on. It's
entertainment.
It's a crackingly good adventure story that has one foot in reality. So there we are.
The myth is nearly every tour I do on when we're standing on the Arnhem Road Bridge on one of the afternoons is, where was the concrete pillbox?
Yeah.
Guaranteed. If I had £1 for every time I was answered that, I'd almost be as rich as you, Paul.
So we have some real-time. So Tamsin has done a count. There were 12 on the Jeeps and a Donner. One guy fell off a Jeep when Goff took a corner at speed. The Donner returned to the squadron, so that leaves 11 at the bridge.
Okay,
so
thank you very much. I took those numbers from Martin Middlebrook's book, so I'll have a word with Martin.
We love real-time discussions, and none of us know it all. So there we are. So thank you, Tamsin. So back to the bridge again.
Let's go back. Here's one for you. I was thinking of saying it. I always jokingly ask my lovely passengers when we're standing round underneath the Arnhem Road Bridge, because what I normally do is stand there, read out the men who've come, and I say to people, and who do you think was the most important unit, in my opinion, to arrive at the Arnhem Road Bridge? And we get comments like, "Oh, the 2nd Battalion," or the guns or whatever. Yeah. And I say, no, in my opinion, it's the 40 men from the Royal Army Service Corps who turned up with all those Jeeps with trailers full of ammunition.
Very good point. Point. This is not your first rodeo, is it, Mr. Cherry? Yeah.
Because a lot of the veterans I spoke to, certainly in the schoolhouse, basically said they had no ammunition left, or about 2 rounds, and that was it. They had to surrender because they had no means of fighting back. So if you take the Royal Army Service Corps, 3 jeeps, 2 trailers each, I think at least 50 to 60,000 rounds of 303. It's a valid point. If they hadn't have made it, the bridge was toast.
Yeah.
Anyway,
no,
let's go on, because I'm sorry this is a repeat. But here we have this is another one. When I usually get having a discussion on the road bridge about where the pillbox is, I usually produce this wonderful aerial photograph taken by the RAF on the 18th, just after the Grabner column, which you can see shot up. It's quite a good photograph because obviously the bit of the bridge that you can see where the houses are, where the houses end before you get to the river, there's 2 sets of stairs. So you can obviously see one this side. Those stairs and those 2 towers are still there. So they are the original bits made with Middlesbrough steel, and the girders in 1936, I think. And if you look, you can you can't really see the flat tower now, but that flat gun was on top of that wooden structure on the top side of the bridge, if that makes some sense, just by the houses.
Yeah.
So I show that picture to people and say, can you show me where the pillbox was on this photograph? And they say there wasn't one. And I say, yes, it was that wooden structure on top of that bridge support, probably, for want of a better word.
Okay.
So, sorry to repeat. We've used that slide twice, but I thought I'd throw it one in. Oh, yes. Oh, now then, where should we start with this one? I think I've got to agree with you. This is probably one of the lines that makes the film, almost, doesn't it, really?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I'm sorry, we haven't got the facilities to take you all prisoner. So, the reality. Lance Sergeant Stan Halliwell, and I'm in contact with his son, or a friend of his son, Phil. Stan is obviously alive. One of the senior members of the 1st Parachute Squadron Royal Engineers. Been on the Bruneval raid back in 1942, North Africa, Sicily. So quite a senior member there. And he had been taken prisoner when he was trying to deliver ammunition to a group from the squadron in an isolated position. He was taken to a German HQ where it's believed he was spoken to by Standanführer Harmel, the commander of the 10th SS Panzer Division. And he said something like, there is going to be a truce, and I want to send you with a message for Colonel Frost. We trust you to be a gentleman and return. Basically, the message was for Frost to be under the bridge at 10:30 on that day to discuss a surrender. So Stan said, I was taken outside, lined up with some Germans to approach our lines, but our lot were firing. There was no truce, and the Germans opened up too. I ran across, shouting at our chaps not to shoot at me. Then I went to find Colonel Frost, running from building to building, and all the firing and the smoke. That was the worst 10 minutes of my life, he said. Colonel Frost told me to tell them to go to hell. Stan asked Frost if he needed to go back and to tell them that, but Frost said they'll get the message. So realistically, there was no white flag, there was no opportunity, there wasn't any opportunity to say we've got the facilities to take you all prisoner. And interestingly enough, Stan's battle dress trousers got so chopped up while he was, I think he got wounded, prisoner of war camp. I think Phil said he was going to listen tonight, so I'm sure Phil will correct me later, but he nicked a pair of SS camouflage trousers, and there is a picture of him after he'd been liberated in 1945 wearing these SS camouflage trousers, and locals suggested that he didn't wear them because he might get
shot in the arse. Yeah.
So that's the little story of the white flag. It's a great scene for the film. Again, you've got Digby, the guy who's Digby taken water, and I just digress again for the anoraks. If you look at the beginning, he shouts out, doesn't he? A company over there, B company with me. And of course, B company was Creepy Crawleys, Major Douglas Crawleys, and he was A company. So they've got that wrong in the film as well. Anyway, let us move on, shall we say? Oh, yes. Now, this is a classic one. Mainly when I was secretary or helping in the background with the Arnhem Veterans Club, helping with obituaries that family members have set in. This is told, obviously, their dad, granddad, uncle, next door neighbour, was at the road bridge with John Frost, escaped to Oosterbeek and then got back across the Rhine. And anyway, so the Germans, as we know, and hate to give a plug to it, Western Army area and on to farm, sealed off the bridge from any reinforcements getting through after the, I'm going to say, early hours Monday morning. Then this is the one bad bit about John Fairley's book, page 128. He refers on the 20th of September, one of Freddie Goss's last action was to organise a dispatch to Divisional HQ at Hartenstein. Corporal Saul of the 2nd Parachute Battalion, together with a companion, went on foot all the way and saw the message safely delivered. So, who was Corporal Saul? So, just to bore everybody briefly, I'm part of a small team of 4. We pulled our research some years ago. We've got a list on a spreadsheet of 11,500 men who were at Arnhem, definitely at Arnhem, numbers, ranks, first names, surnames, date of birth, date of death, prisoner of war camp, platoon, company, battalion, blah, 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 if we know it, if buried and all that sort of stuff. So there is a Corporal Saul in the list, but he was 9 Platoon C Company, who has obviously never made it to the bridge because they got embroiled in the hospital fighting. No mention in the war diary of the 1st Parachute Brigade of sending these 2 messages, nor of their arrival in the 1st Airborne Division war diary. Any suggestions welcome. So, one man there, mythical man. I think that's a mistake in the John Fairley book, but obviously he's no longer with us. So on the next slide, we are definitely going to talk about 3 men who did get away from the road bridge. So Bob Peatling, chairman of the 2nd Parachute Battalion Reunion Club for a while, knew him as well, wrote the book called Without Tradition. He was sent in the evening of the 17th to go and search the police station, and it was usually next morning it was overrun with the German majority of the men. Bob managed to hide in the attic, remained for forays for food until the end of October. So he was in there for the best part of 6 weeks. Rescued by some locals. Bob hid in his house the end of September. He hid with the underground until April 1945, when he heard the Allies were approaching Arnhem and walked there to be liberated. So there's one man who got away from the railway bridge, from the road bridge. Certainly didn't get back to Oosterbeek, certainly didn't get across the river. Now, Arthur Bacon and John Wallace, B and A Company respectively, met up in the death throes, literally like everyone else, hid in the cellar of a house. Soon moved on, hid there for a few weeks. The Germans found Arthur, 28th of October, took him prisoner. John had been searching for food, saw Arthur being awake. John decided to make a break for it and crawled over the damaged girders of the now bombed road bridge. And he managed to get across those to the south side. John was the only man who fought at the road bridge to escape from it, in theory. Others did get away, but who were there, but this was after being taken prisoner, like Tony Tibbett, jumping from a lorry in Brummen, or the Mackay party escaping from a German POW prisoner of war camp. Now, all of those people who got away, obviously there's documentary evidence that they made it away, or were prisoners for a while. Because the problem with these people, I should also say, as well as that list of 11,500 names, I'm happy to say that because I do work at Duxford, I have a copy of the World War II Ringway Parachute course list. Now, I know it's not 100% accurate, but basically I can quite easily say to anybody, my dad was in the parachute regiment in the Second World War, certainly 6th Airborne Division. I can have a look for him on the Ringway list and then tell them what course he was on. And often on these occasions when they say he was in the parachute regiment, I said, well, there's no one of that name number doing a parachute course at Ringway. So it's difficult to see how we could have been in the parachute regiment.
And again, just to add a little of my 2 pence to this, is that this is another thing that's happened in World War II history, is that the Battle of Arnhem has been defined by the battle for the bridge, where and I'm sure plenty of veterans who were fighting at the Hollow, or they were fighting in Oosterbeek or St. Elizabeth Hospital, they never said to their families they were at the bridge. But when they get elderly and they pass away, the families start adding the bridge bit to the story, because Granddad always said he was at Arnhem, and they just added the bridge bit. We get the same with Pegasus Bridge. We get the same with the Battle of Saint-Lô for Americans who were 30 miles away. It's just that there's a label that we give these battles, and it's as much our fault and the descendants' fault for mishearing or adding to what these veterans say.
I think also we've actually found a water. I wouldn't say a water. Well, we have actually found one. We've identified this week, and we've told the museum that they've got medals on display from a guy who claimed to have been in the 156, and yet he was in the 5th Battalion of the King's Own Scottish Borderers in September 1944, and got and was he actually in prison on the 20th? Oh no, he got charged with being absent without leave on the 23rd of September. And his medals are on display there. So we've got newspaper articles when he died to say that he was Arnhem. I don't know, and what was I going to say there? The problem is that over the years, I think the blokes, to some respect, they almost like wanted to big them. I don't think big themselves up is the right word, but it's almost like, what did you do in the war, Daddy? 20 years later. And they said, oh, I fought in. They didn't want to say. I usually tell it to say they were part of Market Garden, but it got corrupted to I fought at Arnhem. So they thought he was at the road bridge. And then you have to point out, and you say to them, well, what unit was he with? And I remember a classic case was, he was 64th Medium Regiment Royal Artillery. I said, oh, well, the closest he got to the Arnhem Road Bridge was 12 miles away. What do you mean? He was at Arnhem. No, I said, no, he was, you have a difficult job. And we've discussed this before when I stood in at, several of my friends who knew when I was doing this were jokingly said, are you going to talk about the submarine that went to Arnhem? Now, I'm not going to talk about that, but they know who it was. And then one of my worst moments ever on tour, and I'm going to relate this one to you, Paul. I was on a Ledger anniversary tour some years ago, and last afternoon before we were coming home, and I said, that's it, ladies and gentlemen, we're all standing around in the group. I said, I've done all I'm going to say. Obviously, we're going to go back to the hotel. Does anybody want to add anything, ask me anything? And this woman piped up and she said, how come you haven't mentioned my father's unit all this time we've been at Arnhem? I said, okay, apologies for that. What unit was he with? She said he was with the 12th Devons. So I was really, really, really shocked, and I wasn't thinking straight, because I would have given a more diplomatic answer. But I looked at her and I said, well, he wasn't here, he was in England. And that was it. The floodgates opened. I was a liar. I was the worst tour guide in the world. I know he was here because he told me, and he told me he landed by glider on Ginkle Heath. And I just said, thank you very much. I think can you please send me some documentary evidence to back up your theory? And I'm still waiting to hear it, So you get the 12th. I don't know what he told his family, because obviously I don't mean this nastily, because they all served. The 12th Devons is not a unit that jumps out as being an airborne unit to most people.
It's just the era we're in. We've now got to just sort of decode and decipher, understand. And Mr. Frickenfracken made the good point. It could be, as the memory gets a little foggy, it's easier to identify with the big name event than the auxiliary correct event. I mean, someone like the Westerboing Heights, you might remember it when you were there in 44, but 40 years ago, I was in I was near the bridge, and there's a big difference between fighting for the bridge and fighting at the bridge. And a hell of a lot of people were fighting towards the bridge.
And then I think, unfortunately, the families might watch A Bridge Too Far because their dad wouldn't watch the first 2 minutes and walked out in disgust. So their memories are clouded by what he's told them or they've seen, and then they want to fit the narrative, fit the story.
Absolutely.
Because I mean, I won't name names, but I remember 10 years ago reading an obituary that was going to go in the Ireland Veterans Club newsletter, and the guy was from the 2nd Parachute Battalion. The family had written it, and they said basically he spent the night of the 5th of June sleeping under a wing of a Dakota at an RAF airfield, ready to be dropped into D-Day as a replacement the next morning. So I put 2 lines through that. I said, we can't print that, because John Frost said, the first I heard about D-Day was when it was announced on the radio. So the CO of his battalion, first he heard about it was on the radio, yet one of his men, without his knowledge, was sleeping under the wing with several others, I hasten to add, to be dropped into Normandy on the 6th of June.
Yeah. Well, we could even go down the rabbit hole of that book that was published in the USA by the commando who was at the last minute added to a glider. And
absolute. I was going to say bullshit, but I'm not allowed to swear that. Let's not have any swearing like you did on yes.
We're in danger of going down a massive rabbit hole of that.
We are indeed. Well, we're going to go down a bigger one in a minute.
This is a classic.
It's the classic, yes, the classic, the Arnhem equivalent of the Iranian embassy balcony is my equivalent of this one. 4 men in this photograph, but we've got at least 400 names for it, I would suggest, at the last count. So what do we know about this film? Well, we're certainly taken on Friday the 22nd of September, there or abouts, by Sergeant Mike Lewis of the Army Film and Photographic. He captioned it as a patrol of paratroopers moving through ruins of Oosterbeek. Obviously posed because the guys are coming towards the camera, so the blokes, Mike Lewis has got his back to the Germans. Interestingly enough, one of the best comments about this photograph has got to come from Harry Faulkner Brown, member of the 4th Parachute Squadron. He was actually an officer, so I won't hold that against him. Wrote a book called A Sapper at Arnhem, and his men saw this photograph being taken. And he said, our position was in one of some ruined one-story buildings which had lost their roofs and some of the external walls facing us. There had probably been stables or garages for the Hartenstein Hotel, which is exactly where we're talking about now. About the middle of the morning, a group of 4 members of the division appeared with a press photographer who proceeded to take shots of the group moving through the ruined garages. After everything we had been through, we were rather disgusted at this untrue artificial display of house clearance, and my sappers gave them a few boos and catcalls, an indication of their disapproval. So we knew it was in the grounds of the Hartenstein. A good friend of mine, Robert Voskill, president of the Arnhem 1944 Fellowship, and I thought I'd wear my 75th anniversary polo shirt tonight, as in deference to my president. He was able to identify the location, and it is now obviously the building where this was taken is now demolished, and it's in the car park of the Kleine Hartenstein restaurant, which is just along the road from there. So there is circumstantial evidence that we have identified, or we think we know where some of these men came from. Major Geoffrey Powell, who was commanding the 156 Battalion at the time, had sent his only other surviving officer, Lieutenant Piers Orbin, down to the Hartenstein for the O Group. And he said, because he's going through bandit country, I'm going to send 4 men with you. Major Powell later became a colonel, wrote 2 books on Arnhem, and also worked for MI5, shall we say. But as he's dead, I think I can safely blow his cover now. John Waddy identified the man at the back with the pistol because he's got a bandaged hand, which was Noel Rosenberg. He thinks it's Noel Rosenberg from the 156. His family think he's got a good every family says their dad's in this photograph. As I said, 400 names at least for this. There's been numerous articles over the year. When I was Arnhem Veterans Club secretary, you would averagely get 1 a week. My dad's in this. Can you confirm it? Can you write a letter of authenticity? Because Duxford, Airborne Assault Duxford won't authenticate. They get asked, can you confirm that that's my dad in the photograph? I've had stories from people who said that's my dad's in that. I've asked him for the name and his number. He's never done a parachute course, doesn't appear to have been at Arnhem, etc., etc. The other thing I would say, there's an interesting comment in John O'Reilly's book on the 156 Parachute Battalion from Delhi to Arnhem. And this guy here, he was called Hank Harding because he never ever did his chin strap up because he thought he was a cowboy. So as you can see, the guy has got his chin strap down. So we think that might be, so we possibly identified 2 of them. Possibly, I say, because as far as I'm concerned, until you get a bit of paper from the photographer who got their autograph, I'm not saying anything. You know, I could read you out a list of about 40 to 50 names of men who are in this. Each man has got about at least 20 names to it. So they can't all be right, as I say. And I often call this the group of 4 or 400.
But the point is, as a photo, if that just about perfectly symbolizes the Battle of Arnhem, the spirit, the Mark 5 ends, the helmets,
not shaving, not eating, etc., etc.
It's just fantastic, you know. Yeah. So William Stark is saying Dugdale, I think.
Oh, yes, you're quite right. Yes, I will take that, Will. Thank you, Will. Good friend of mine, Will. Thank you. Dugdale, yes. Not Hank Harding. That was another one. He was another cowboy. Let's move on from that. All I'm going to say is,
and this is another doozy.
Well then, Well then, this is a good one, isn't it? Because this is another one that comes up on nearly every single Arnhem Market Garden tour that I do. So, classic scene in the film, both films, Theirs is the Glory and Bridge Too Far. Can I just say, just in case people weren't aware, when they sent the 200 or so guys over to Holland in 1945 to make the film, if they didn't have a script, that they said, and if the guys wanted to suggest something that happened to them at Arnhem and it was cleared in the film, they got, I think, £3 or £5. So there's a container of red berets in Theirs is the Glory. There is a container of red berets in The Bridge Too Far. True story. Simple reason. Our old mate Boy Browning went to North Africa in December 1942 on an inspection visit, and he reported, in his report, he stated, berets, excellent in every respect, although a lot of blokes seem to have lost them, in inverted commas. He didn't say it in those words. A lot lost and more replacements and reserve needed. So he privately, he said he was unhappy that men had lost them because he couldn't, they didn't identify as elite troops under his command. Probably sold them, is what I jokingly said, and they were wearing whatever they could find. And he said that Browning actually said on future airborne operations, berets needed to be sent via the supply drops. Talk about packing, if you can say. So this is where you can't blame the RAF for dropping containers of berets, because who packed the containers? The 1st Airborne Division.
Yeah.
So they were sent to the airfields, and the RAF, the liaison officer would have said, right, those are the supplies for D+1, D+2, D+3, D+4, D+5, etc., etc. And I've looked at some of the tables, and there were like, most days there was a container of clothing for obvious reasons. Two stories. Whenever we go on exercise, when we went exercising, certainly in Germany, the QM would always take a couple of pairs of trousers, jackets, boots with him, just in case anything happens. And my good mate Frog, his size 8 DMS fell apart in the Falklands. He managed to get back to the QM's department, and they gave him a pair of size 10s. And as he said, he was walking around like Coco the Clown for the rest of the campaign. So you always get spares. Clothing is there. Browning was unhappy. I suspect he thought that they'd want these for the victory parade in Berlin, but you can't blame the RAF. These were on the list, and Browning, in my humble opinion, just to character assassinate him again, might have been better off not going to Holland, staying in England, getting reports that things weren't going well, saying to his supply staff officers, what are we parachuting in today? Why are we sending a container of red berets? Get that one off the aircraft.
Yeah, perhaps they don't need that right now. Yes, yeah.
Precisely, yeah.
And what we definitely say is the whole dramatic scene of a guy running out into the field and picking up a thing. And as again, the comment there, and honestly, isn't that the only closed container one person could lift and carry? And that was always my problem with that, is I've handled one of those drop canisters, and you wouldn't be like, you'd have to be superhuman to pick one of them up on your own. If it had anything in it that was of any use, if it had ammo or medical supplies or whatever,
shells, whatever, you're
not going to pick it up on your own. So it's another great scene in the movie that it somehow represents.
Made out of polystyrene, don't you?
Yeah, but it represents some sort of talking point of the hopelessness and nothing's going to go right now. What were the senior
officers doing? And interesting enough, the guy who went to get the container, he later was, I think his name was John Salthouse, and he was in the bill as a CID inspector, was it?
Right.
I can't think of his name, because Alan Armstrong is also one of the extras in.
He is, yeah.
Anyway, now then, that realistically is the end of it. Except we've got a little. This is one. I'm going to bring you in on this one.
I'm so glad you're doing this. And every time I see this one on Facebook, I lose an hour of my life. I know that I die a little bit.
Well, I thought, seeing as the 6th of June's just gone, not too far away, and Arnhem is coming up, and you often get it about Arnhem as well, because you get these idiots, don't you? The men on the right are about to paratroop into Normandy on D-Day 1944. The men on the left are the very same group 70 years later. Even more amazing, they are on the same plane which carried them into battle. before we move on. So first of all, let's just say, if it's a D-Day photograph, did not everybody not jump with blackened faces, first of all?
Oh, you're using logic now, Neil. You can't use logic when it comes to memes. Memes hit you in the heart. They're not meant to be deep. Yeah, no, absolutely.
What a great story. What a great story. So let's go to the next one, shall we? The reality. So this is the World War II photograph. That's the original. So entirely happy with that. Let's go to the next one.
Yeah.
So I think I've said a few words about it. Image taken by United States Army Air Force Private Posnack, Barkston Heath, 17th of September, 5 Platoon S Company, 1st Parachute Battalion. Most have been identified, and at least 3 of the identified men killed at Arnhem. Fantastic. So the reality. The East Anglia Parachute Regimental Association on a visit to the Dakota in 2012. Some not parachute trained, because if you look closely, we have on the left, second man in, that's Johnny Peters, Border Regiment. He was chairman of the Arnhem Veterans Club for many, many years. The other guy, I think, is also Border Regiment. Like, his name escapes me now, but the man with the stick, yes, on the right. And interestingly enough, of that group of 5 people at the back there, with the one kneeling down is the gate guardian, right. the custodian. So you've got the three guys standing behind them. One of them is a good friend of mine called Colin Watson, and he was born in 1954. So I think we can say that the whole photograph is the colour one of 2012 is absolutely fantastic, and the rest of it is absolute. I'm going to say Heinz Sevelo.
You can say bollocks. It is, but the thing is, it's representative of the kind of stuff that we are dealing with on a constant. You know, the Heinz Sevelo story. The other one is the young Americans who are going to go and die in Omaha Beach, when it's a photo of Operation Torch. And they always say, within too few hours, many of these 17-year-old kids will be dead. You go, well, they weren't 17. It's the wrong. But anyway, we're digressing now, but. We have a couple of people have asked you about another Arnhem myth, so I'll put it in there, and it's about Dennis is asking, the radios were all crap and had the wrong crystals.
Right. In theory, no, because if you were I'm going to throw this back to Dennis. If you're a signaller and you were told this is your radio set, you'd want to make sure it was working before you went. Now, right. There is, Dennis, what I need to, this is going to be one of those cases. I will only be 2 seconds.
I will keep on talking while you're gone. So yeah, I knew the radio story would come up.
And folks, one book, and I thought it was under there, but it's not. It's called Echoes of Arnhem by Lewis Golden. And
yes, I heard of that one.
Yeah, he's a signal officer with the Light Regiment in charge of divisional signals. Their radios did work. Well, in fact, the radios didn't work, but they knew that in North Africa that they didn't work. So the radios, the 68s and the 18s, was it 68s and 18 sets from memory?
Definitely 18 sets, yeah.
Yeah, they didn't work in North Africa. They knew they didn't work in Arnhem. And it just got worse that I think the ground there is very sandy like Aldershot. If Dennis wants to contact me, I will try and find Echoes from Arnhem.
Yeah, there was another chap I think in the Netherlands, Mark was asking as well. But yeah, no, I mean, again, that show is trying to convey the idea of the 1st Airborne Division not being unprofessional, but being somehow there's a bad luck about them. Nothing's going to work. It's the foreshadowing something's going to happen. It's all part of the narrative, but it's for the film, but it's not part of the real narrative.
Another guy I met who's got a who had a very, very interesting war, and I'm sure if I mention the name Tony Dean Drummond to you.
Oh yeah.
Because he'd obviously, those of you, if anyone's watching, did watch the Trugino Aqueduct talk many, many years ago. He was on that. He said basically, like that guy did in the film. We know the radios don't work, but everyone will be. The plan's going to work, so everybody's going to be in the divisional perimeter within 2 days, 3 days, and we'll send dispatch riders with the. Well, yeah, that's a good question, a good one, because Right. Going off a complete tangent here. Roy Urquhart, when he goes out on his visit on the Sunday afternoon, he tells his singler to come off the divisional net to try and get onto the 1st Parachute Brigade net. Well, you try netting a radio in the back of a moving Jeep under fire, etc., etc. And that's why he lost contact for some extent with division and brigade. So he was driving round. Just to go off on a myth, I always say to people, was Urquhart justified in going to see those people, you know, these senior commanders on the afternoon of the 17th? Yes. I mean, he didn't really come up with any reasons, but obviously when you, as I'm sure you know, when the officers go to staff college, they are told, if you're a lieutenant colonel, you go and see your company commanders once a day, just to see that they're all right in their positions, you're happy with them. So the company commanders go and visit their platoon commanders. The brigade commander comes and visits the lieutenant commanders in his brigade. So Urquhart was quite justified, in my opinion, on the afternoon of the 17th to go and see Hicks, first of all, because that was an easy one, because he knew where he was going to be. He's been told, you're going to be in Wolfhazer, set your brigade headquarters up somewhere in Wolfhazer, and I'll come and find you. And Lathbury was the difficult one, because his brigade was on 3 different routes. He could have been on any one of 3, and it just happened that Roy Urquhart drove around trying to get on the brigade net. And I think that's covered actually it's either in Martin Middlebrook, is it, or in Echoes from Arnhem. Just to digress, but yes,
and it does. I mean, I'll just do it because loads of comments have come in about radios, which I'll just put them all up and read them all. And then so Paul Reed is saying the radios is complex. Platoons could talk to companies and battalion headquarters, but battalions could not talk to brigades and Div HQ. Nicholas Moss, the wrong crystal issue was 2 heavy VCR 193 sets sent by the 306th US, I think.
That's certainly true with the US, because their ground, they sent 2 or 3 ground forward air controllers, and they had radios that weren't compatible with the English or couldn't get on their net or whatever.
Definitely heard that one. And then Paul is adding Royal Artillery radios worked well, thus the full link to the bridge. Scott is saying there's a great article about radios written by Major Greenacre in a journal called Defence Studies. Sheldrake, the general, is saying, weren't there enough working radios to call an artillery fire, which is backing up what Paul said. Certainly the artillery.
Now, can we just pause on that one?
Please do, yes.
What happened was they were struggling to get through, and a guy called Sergeant Norman Patton of the Forward Observation Unit took an aerial up a chimney in Oosterbeek, and that gave it extra height to get to 30 Corps down at Nijmegen. So that was about on the 22nd, 23rd. Again, Arnhem Bridge Target Mike 1, another great book on the Light Regiment there. It's all covered in that. So I know with a name like Sheldrake, he's got to be an ex-gunner.
He's the next general of gunnery.
Oh, general.
Sheldrake. Yeah, he's well, yes. No, so absolutely. So I mean, the thing is, what the fact that we're getting these messages explaining it, and Tamsin is adding that Recce's 22 sets were working okay, is again, the film simplifies it as if basically there's one set of radios going in one direction to another set of when in fact communications within an airborne division and with the support is a very complicated setup with small radios basically connecting to medium radios that connect to large radios.
They had some of those walkie-talkies as well that worked.
Yeah, so
two-level company level.
It's an interesting discussion, and we could go on it, but we will stop things there, Neil, because all good things have to come to an end.
Yes, we've done an hour.
I will leave the thought with you about a Browning assessment show at some point later in the year. But in the meantime, we will bring things in. I've got 2 shows coming your way tomorrow. We've got the fantastic Steve Clay's continuing the story of the 1st Division, US 1st Division in Czechoslovakia, and then later on, Alan Converse is doing the British 50th Division in Normandy, the first of a 2-parter, possibly a 3-parter about his research into the 50th Division over the last few years. That's been really good. Really good talk tonight, Neil and Paul from Old Frontline. Outstanding from Jamie. Ian, very enjoyable. Sorry, Mr. Fricker, very enjoyable. And we had another one there. Great show. So it's been fantastic stuff. So folks, I'll see you all again tomorrow.
Could I, before you go, I'm just going to think aloud here. If any of the lovely viewers have got anything that they want to, we could always do a part 2 if there was enough interest. But I don't want to come up with the subject.
Let's do it. Yeah, let's do a follow-up.
But I was just going to say, if people want to throw some topics in for discussion in, let's do it. You know,
Yeah.
because you know me, I mean, I can waffle on, you know, uselessly for an hour and a half quite easily.
Brilliant stuff, folks. I'll see you all again tomorrow.
Thank you so much.
Cheers, everybody. Bye.
Take care. Bye.